Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Are we all seated? All right. I will try to speak up. We have a really lively expo, so I'm really happy that you all have taken time to come out to our panel, and we're excited that we have some really engaging panelists today, current and past work that they've been involved in with cities, not just in the US, but also around the globe. So welcome to Transatlantic Collaboration, Smart City Myths, Realities, and Bold Solutions. As introduced, I'm Shannon Macika. I'm with a company called BABLE Smart Cities. We work across Europe and also globally to really try to help cities break through on those big challenges when it comes to urban transformation, when it comes to implementing innovative solutions. And we're really excited to be at an event like this and have conversations like today and hopefully have a little fun. So one thing that we've seen a lot in our work is that collaboration, whether it be within a city or beyond borders, let alone across oceans, often a little bit more complicated than you want to admit at face value. Definitely lots of positive lessons to be learned, but also some challenges. So today we're going to test some of the assumptions that we've seen in the past about what works, what doesn't, also have a little bit of fun. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. So I think going down the line, I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves because you do the best job of it. And in the spirit of fun, your name, your role, anything you want to say about your role, and favorite ice cream flavor. I'll let you go first, Stephen.
Interesting set of questions.
Yes.
My name is Steve Goldsmith. I'm a professor at the Bloomberg Center for Cities at Harvard University. I'm a longtime city official in various ways in the U.S. You know, I just had last week for the first time pistachio ice cream. So today it's my favorite.
Fantastic. I love that answer.
Hi, I'm Shin-pei Tsay. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics for the City of Boston and also the Chief Research and Data Officer. And my favorite ice cream flavor is peppermint stick.
Hi, I'm Vítor Moreira. I'm from Portugal, in the other side of the Atlantic Sea. I'm general manager of Municipality of Famalicão. It's in the north of Portugal. It's a medium-sized city in Portugal. Here, maybe a small city, but in Portugal is a medium-sized city. We have 140,000 inhabitants. And before my new job, this job, as general manager in the municipality of Famalicão, I worked 20 years in a port wine company in Douro Valley in Portugal.
Vítor, I want to know if there's also ice cream coming out of that too. We switched on our fun
My
facts.
ice cream, my flavor is pistachio too.
Pistachio, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for the introductions. So going into our first segment, Smart City Mythbusters, we want to tackle a few myths or common assumptions that you hear when people talk about smart, sustainable cities. And when we were preparing for this panel, we had a really interesting discussion about a few different topics, but one of the ones that really stood out was this idea that European cities are better at integrating climate and mobility compared to US cities. So I know, Shin-pei, you had some really good opinions on this topic and experience. Maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I think that just from my, the ability to go and learn from some of these other cities and other places, it does seem like, well, Shan, I should say that I'm not busting this myth. I think that sometimes it is true because there is more supranational policy at the EU level, policy at the country level, policy at the city or regional levels to support that integration. There are these sustainable mobility plans that allow for that to happen. There's a lot of public investment in technologies to facilitate the integration. And I think there's a little bit more, but more and more we're adopting this in the US, more of a culture of accountability and performance metrics. So the idea of aiming for a certain outcome and measuring against that outcome is sometimes more in practice across places in Europe and a little bit more uneven in the United States. That was my supposition, but would love to hear what Steve and Vítor think about that.
I think it's not a myth. I think in Europe we have more integrate the themes about environment, about mobility, because we have a problem, but at the same time an opportunity. We have a lot of regulation. We have our regulation is for all the Europe. So when in Brussels they make some rules, this kind of rules are from all the European Union. So for now we must implement environment, climate change and mobility. So that's why people think in Europe we are implement the best than in the U.S. This kind of policies, and I think it's true. It's true, but we need to improve our growth. And as you know, the sustainability is are three areas: environment, social, and economy. And I think in all countries we must improve all at the same time, all three parts at the same time. So sometimes I agree with this, other times I don't agree with this. But usually, and now, the major part of our investment in Portugal is in climate change.
Thanks, Vítor. Stephen, I know you've had a career even before your current professorship working in New York. I don't know if you have anything to add from that experience or currently now when you're working with other cities.
Well, let me answer your question slightly differently, which is, I think we should start with the proposition that smart cities, smart applications help a local government accomplish its policy goals more effectively. So if Europe has more attention to climate and sustainability as it does than most U.S. cities, that I think is a result of a set of policy decisions. But if we think about the conversation, is this working? If we think about the conversations today, I would say the goal of this meeting is to help officials accomplish their policy objectives and a higher quality of life for their communities as they define it. That's one. Secondly, I think you asked actually two different questions. That was one. The second is that U.S. cities and U.S. regions are more fragmented, right? There's less top-down policy guidance, EU, OECD, whatever the case may be. But what we see, and we can, a little bit of this is illustrated by the U.S. DOT SMART grants from the last administration that said what we really need is to create platforms that allow systems to work, right? So if we think about transportation, we think about mobility and TNCs and bikes and outdoor cafes and valets and all the other things, parking that touch a curb, right? So the question then becomes, we can operate as a system if we have a platform that allows the digital incorporation of the pieces. So there is, I think, in the best, one of the best examples in the U.S. of what this is about to be is the work that Boston is doing, issuing a whole set of new RFPs that will bring those systems together. So in summary, if we have a digital platform that allows an ecosystem to operate as a system, then you could amplify whatever the local policy aspires to accomplish.
Thanks for those comments. I know Boston was referenced. If you have anything to add, Shin-pei, before we move on to the next myth.
Well, maybe the one thing I would add is that because of maybe the lack of unified top-down policy and the more local-based policy making or program development, you do have some flexibility to do more innovative RFP design and search for service. So in this case, our RFP for curb transformation was, instead of one whole, a whole all-in-one program that one technology vendor would provide, it was 4 modules. We were looking for best-in-class, recognizing that technology providers might be excel in certain things and have certain strengths, and then setting an expectation that they would work together to build this platform. So it allows for a little bit more innovation and flexibility, which I think sometimes I don't see as much of that necessarily in places where there is more top-down policy, and sometimes we're allowed a little bit more flexibility locally.
I know you want to ask the next question, but this is such an important point. Just let me do this again and make it more obscure, which is that an advantage of the U.S. system is there is more opportunity for local initiative. But that local initiative will not create more digital solutions unless the procurement systems change. And what Boston did, right, is issued, and I'm going to use my own words, but issued an RFP that essentially allows the pieces to be connected in, so the protocols in the RFP say these, you need to respond in a way that allows us to use your solution with other solutions, and we, the city, will configure those solutions after we get the responses. So the RFP then sets the conditions for integrating the solutions, and that gives them both the flexibility to buy innovation from multiple vendors and to configure it in a way that meets the needs of Boston, which is the advantage of a bottom-up instead of a top-down system. It's really important if it works.
I think we're all hoping to see the success of it, so let's stay tuned. But yes, going on to our next, I shouldn't say myth, I should say assumption, because some of these we're here to confirm or not confirm, right? But especially I know in our work in the EU, at the start of some of the first smart city projects, there was really a lot of focus on the tech, the innovation, always, of course, in response to a need. But as Vítor highlighted, this has also evolved into a broader mission around climate change, climate neutrality, the EU mission on climate neutral and smart cities, even with the environment piece at the forefront. But there is still this underlying, when you hear smart city, you think tech, you think something digital, some type of flashy product. So let's challenge this assumption. Smart cities are primarily about technology. What makes a city smart in your perspectives? Vítor, you want to start?
Yeah. For me, no. Smart cities, people. If we don't put people at the center of the process of the smart city, we don't build a smart city, a really smart city. The most important is hearing people and prepare the city to engage the people. And I say engage and not participation, because for me it's very different. Participation and engage and involve people. And we need to build a really smart city. We need to engage people. We need to learning from people from our community. In our city, it's a small city, we have some programs to listen, to hear from people, to really engage people. And for me, it's the most important. Technology is only a tool, and we use, of course, technology. We use all the tools it's possible, but the focus is people. We work for people. So a smart city, for me, is people.
Thanks, Vítor.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I very much believe that. I also think that so the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics is the Mayor's Civic Innovation Team, and it's closely coupled with the Department of Innovation Technology. Our chief is over there, Santi. And I think we're moving into a period where once upon a time this office was the recipient or was a way into City Hall for people who were testing technology. Is this idea make sense? Is this technology viable? It's seeing if the technology works. I think we're transitioning to a period where the application is what really matters. The technologies are often proven. We're still testing things with AI. There's a lot of still experiments and making sure things are joined up, making sure that, but I think the questions that we're asking is this effective? Does this solve the problem we're defining, rather than, is this technology viable per se? And I think that's the transition we're moving into. And so I very much agree. It's about like what is the problem you're trying to solve, rather than looking for a problem that technology can solve for, and what is its impact on the people we serve? And that ultimately is the most important aspect of a smart city, in our opinion.
So I have 2 one-minute stories. Years ago, 7, 8, 9 years ago, Bloomberg Philanthropies made a major grant to Chicago to create a significant data analytics center. And they had a very expert person running the process, and she put all this technical skill together and had very little traction from the agencies. And because the agencies weren't interested in assisting with technology. So she reversed the process and said to the agencies, name me a problem, her name was Brenna, name me, Brenna, a problem that you think technology and data analytics that you're working on will help you solve more. And so I call this the rat story, because the first use case she picked was, tell me where the rat infestation in Chicago is going to occur before it occurs so I can deal with it, right? So I use that because all the fancy work we were doing to help her set up a data analytics center was irrelevant until she identified the use cases. Then last night, on my way in from LaGuardia, my son calls, who is CIO of the Indianapolis airport, and he knows I do a lot of work on generative AI, and I kind of trying to encourage it to be used more. And he says to me the following: I'm meeting with all these vendors who are trying to sell me generative AI, but when I ask them what is the airport problem that I need to solve with your product, they say I don't yet have that answer, right? So I think this goes back to your question, which is it needs to revolve around a real pain point, a real issue, whether it's now or in the future, that can be solved with the technology.
I think that is an excellent way to end this first segment. So,
Shannon,
yes,
I
Vítor.
have a curiosity. Yesterday, we visit the public library here in New York, and they have an exhibition from the centenary of the New Yorker magazine in the public library. And I read the sentence from the founder: we need a new magazine 100 years ago. I need a new magazine for smart urban audience.
So even back then, we were predicting.
Is the founder of the New Yorker magazine write this? We need a new magazine for smart urban audience. It's curious about the term smart.
We told you all we were going to have fun today. So moving on into our next segment, and our last segment, we also wanted to talk a little bit about policy versus reality. So I've asked each of our panelists, all involved in very engaging work in their communities, just to talk a little bit about either one policy or one program, one approach that they've worked on that they've seen be successful where they are, and some thoughts on if and how that could maybe scale across the Atlantic, or what could transfer to other communities. So I know we talked a little bit about procurement already, but there's some really interesting work being done around equity in procurement in Portugal, correct?
Yep. Yeah, in Europe, and of course in Portugal, we have a new approach for public procurement. We have a strategic public procurement. Not only the value for money is important for public procurement, but we need to improve social clauses and environment clauses. not only the price for the building or for what we are buying. We need, and it's mandatory to introduce new clauses to promote environment and to promote social clauses. For example, if we have two companies with the same prices, if one company have less gap between the salary between women and men, this company is gain the project. From the same prices, if the salary, the gap is less, they gain. And we have a lot of clauses, and it's mandatory to use this kind of clauses, not only the price count in the public procurement in Europe now.
Shin-pei, I see you turning your mic on. I don't know if you wanted to respond to that before we move to...
Well, maybe along the vein of that top-down approach versus the bottom-up, I wanted to offer an example that's related to equity in procurement because we're doing a lot of work on supplier diversity. One of our fellows last year did a scrub of our onboarding process for vendors to better understand why is it that in spite of relative good representation with minority women-owned businesses, they're not onboarding as vendors for the city of Boston. And so that was a user research, but it was very bottom up. It was like user research, scrub of the process, scrub of the website, how are we communicating? And I think it's led to various improvements that kind of touch on technology, not led by technology, and facilitated technology facilitating the process. We tweaked the way that people would see it, tweaked outreach, and allowed us to more confidently think about how would we expand this effort. So most recently, we entered a MOU with the city of Cambridge so that it's much more of a regional thing. And this is something that we also touched on as a panel is just this idea of a bit of the kind of individualistic approach, the city-by-city approach that does happen in the U.S. context, and the idea of like thinking more regionally and across jurisdictions for the better of all the different vendors who may not be located in Boston and want to expand their market reach, and how we can enable that possibility through our similar technology tweaks.
Let me stick with the same theme, but slightly differently. The solutions enabled by the technology have outpaced the structure of government, right? So government, if you think about Gen AI in particular, government is organized vertically, and the power of the data that's now accessible is enterprise data. So you've got a business customer inside an agency, and you have a problem that maybe has a solution in another agency. So the procurement system is in most places obsolete, and is the structure of government. So because we have an ability to deliver more information and enable more discussion. So my answer to your question about what could be transferable would be the following. So A, we need to recognize that the largest problems are system problems, and the mayor or the governor needs to create a task force, an approach that is multi-agency, A. B, that multi-agency group needs to issue an RFP that asks for solutions, and cities have gotten really good at buying stuff, but not so good at buying solutions. So if we can produce a more creative procurement process that goes across agencies and cross sectors, that inquires of the solutions in a broad way, we'll be able to unleash the power of tech in a way that we're not yet doing today. Some cities in the U.S. will do that, not very many. It has a little bit more, there's pros and cons across each side of the Atlantic, right, in the sense that a more organized approach that you might find in Europe or Korea or China provides a bigger overview, but it often restricts the creativity. So the answer, I think, is to get the best of both worlds.
I think that's a perfect way for us to end this segment also. And we don't have a ton of time for our panel today, so we're not going to be able to take questions at the moment. I know I'll be around. I think some of our panelists will be around if you have questions after. But before we close out, we did just want to do one quick lightning round. If someone just walked in, because we do have a lot of people floating around, and they missed all of the rest of our session except for this moment, what is one thing you'd want them to take away from today, either from our session or just from this event in general, that you think is important on this topic? Want to go ahead?
I'm going to say something I said to an earlier panel, which is an audience for an earlier panel, which is as technologists or people who run companies, I really encourage you to think about the role you play in the space of the city and to get to know the cities that you operate in. Really try to understand the problems that they're experiencing. I think Stephen encapsulated it really well, that the structures of government are not keeping up with the technological revolution. And we really need we can't do this alone. We really need a lot of help. Our challenges are very complex. And so really want to invite everyone to really get to know the place that they're in and really care about it in that way.
I love that. Thank you. Vítor?
I think we are not alone. So I think if we start to build a smart city with the people, not for the people. For me, it's the most important.
Thank you, Vítor. Last but not least, Steve.
We have an enormous opportunity to understand the quantity of data that resides in city government, particularly in conjunction with their residents. We now, for the first time, have the tools to understand that data and to preemptively solve problems that previously we just responded to. So giving individuals in government and in communities the ability to use that data more effectively in a timely way could really transform the quality of urban life.
Thanks, Steve. And I know I really enjoyed preparing for this panel, and even just today, hearing some really practical examples. I hope all of you participating, no matter what perspective you're coming from, public sector, private, somewhere in between, academia, that you also took something back with you. And thank you all for coming. If you have any other questions, I'm sure we'll be hanging around, so definitely come up and ask.